Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Inji, and I work across strategy, leadership, and learning. And over the years, I've moved between consulting, entrepreneurship, and large corporates, often sitting at the intersection of functions rather than inside just one. And this is Extra Shot, a podcast about small decisions, the kind that quietly compounds into disproportionate impact. No dramatic moves, just sharper thinking. So let's get into today's episode. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that your job description, the skills you're paid for, and even the way your team operates are already partially out of date. Not because you've changed, but because the tools around you did. Generative AI, automation, new platforms, systems learning, updating, and iterating faster than most organizations can adapt. And that creates one very uncomfortable question. In the age of AI, how do we learn faster than change? If you listen to the people building the leading AI systems, one theme keeps coming up. The pace is accelerating, capabilities that once took years now emerge in months, sometimes even weeks. And we're already seeing the effects everywhere. AI can summarize reports in seconds, generate code, draft presentations, simulate customer conversations, produce strategy frameworks, even critique your writing. But here's the strange part. Even as access to information becomes faster, most people are still using old learning habits. We save articles, open 20 browser tabs, watch tutorials, collect prompts, consume endlessly. But we don't necessarily become more capable. We're learning faster in volume, not in transformation. And that's the real issue. The problem isn't that AI is moving too fast. It's that our old model of learning, linear, passive, one-off, can't keep up with an environment that changes continuously. So we need to shift from learning more to learning differently. Because accelerated learning is not the same thing as development. Acceleration increases output. Development changes how you think. And there's a big difference between knowing something and becoming someone who can adapt. This is where many people misunderstand AI. They think the advantage comes from mastering tools, but tools change constantly. The real advantage is becoming someone who can learn quickly, unlearn deliberately, and translate insights into action. And that's a different capability entirely. Here's an analogy I love. Streaming platforms can recommend infinite music, but recommendations alone do not make you a better musician. You still need to practice, get feedback, repeat, and experiment. AI works the same way. Access to information has exploded, but transformation still requires engagement. So, what does modern learning actually look like now? Think of it as a three-layer system. The first layer is what I'm going to call the sensing layer. This is where AI becomes incredibly useful. AI is exceptional at scanning large amounts of information and surfacing patterns. You can ask it to summarize industry shifts, compare competitors, identify emerging skills, benchmark trends, explain unfamiliar concepts quickly, instead of manually guessing what to learn next. AI can help you sense where the world is moving. And that matters because most people don't fall behind from lack of intelligence. They fall behind from lack of awareness. The second layer is the adaptation layer. This is where learning becomes personalized. One of the most powerful things about AI systems is that they adapt in real time. If you struggle with concepts, they adjust. If you move quickly, they accelerate. If your writing is unclear, they critique it instantly. That's radically different from traditional learning models. And it means we can now build adaptive learning loops into everyday life. For example, instead of just asking AI to write something for you, ask it to critique your version. Ask, what is weak here? Where would a skeptical stakeholder disagree? What assumptions am I missing? You're no longer using AI as a shortcut. You're using it as a sounding board, as a feedback system. And feedback is where growth actually happens. The third layer, and the most important layer, is the integration layer. Because this is where most people fail. AI can give you insight. It can personalize learning. It can accelerate information. But you still need to integrate that learning into how you work, decide, communicate, and lead. And that requires experimentation, not just consumption. This is why I think one of the most important skills in the age of AI is running micro experiments. Testing and learning. Small tests, small iterations, small risks. Instead of endlessly reading about productivity, test one workflow this week. Instead of debating whether AI can improve communication, use it to critique your next presentation. Instead of waiting until you master a tool, build something small with it. Because experimentation shortens the distance between insight and capability compounds. I also think we need to rethink what learning actually means. For years, professional learning was treated like an event, a course, a certification, a workshop, something separate from the work itself. But increasingly, learning is becoming embedded inside the flow of work. Continuous, adaptive, always updating. Which means the people who thrive won't necessarily be the people with the highest qualifications. They'll be the people with the fastest adaptation cycle. And this has leadership implications too, because organizations can't simply tell people to learn faster while keeping rigid systems. A learning culture requires psychological safety, experimentation, space for iteration, permission to try imperfectly. If every mistake gets punished, nobody experiments. And if nobody experiments, nobody adapts. And accordingly, nobody evolves. This is especially important because AI creates another danger: optimization without reflection. The temptation becomes faster output, faster execution, faster content, faster decisions. But speed alone is not intelligence. Sometimes the most important thing is still judgment, ethics, context, emotional nuance, critical thinking, the deeply human parts. And those are not things we should outsource too casually, because the goal is not to become more machine like. It's becoming more intentional about where humans create unique value. That's why I think the people who will thrive in the age of AI are not necessarily the most technical. They're the people who can combine curiosity, adaptability, judgment, communication, and experimentation. People who know how to ask better questions, connect ideas across domains, learn publicly, and evolve continuously. In other words, generalists with learning velocity, which actually brings us full circle to episode 1. But there's another subtle shift happening. The value of knowledge is decreasing, and the value of interpretation is increasing. Because when information becomes abundant, sense making becomes scarce. Anyone can generate content now, but not everyone can frame complexity clearly, apply judgment, build trust, or turn information into action. And that's where human leverage still exists. So here's the extra shot insight for today. In the age of AI, the competitive advantage is no longer simply what you know. It's how quickly you can adapt, how intentionally you can experiment, and how effectively you can turn learning into behavior. Because learning faster than change is not about consuming more information. It's about shortening the cycle between awareness, experimentation, reflection, and action. And that cycle is now one of the most valuable systems you can build. So here's your extra shot question for today. Where in your life or work do you need to upgrade your learning rhythm? Not in volume, in speed of adaptation. What's one small experiment you could run this week that moves you slightly beyond your current comfort zone? Because in a world where AI can generate almost anything, your real edge is becoming the kind of person who can evolve continuously. The future probably won't belong to the people who know the most. It will belong to the people who adapt the fastest. That's the extra shot. Not louder, not faster, just more adaptive. If this episode gave you something useful, an idea, a framework, or a question to sit with, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe on your streaming platform of choice. It helps the right conversations reach the right people. And if you know someone trying to navigate the AI era without losing their sense of direction, send this their way. Because in the end, learning is no longer something we finish. It's something we continuously redesign. See you next time.